Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us on the Flourishing Life podcast, where we will be discussing what we see on the daily. We're Jackie and Tad from Flourish Medical and Wellness in Savage, Minnesota, where listening to our patients is the priority. Our foundational medicine clinic bridges the gap between traditional and functional medicine. We are pattern recognition specialists that focus on individualized patient care and health optimization. With a combined 30 years of medical experience, our goal is to provide insights that help you take control of your health. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Flourish Medical Wellness and on our website, flourishmedicalwellness.com, to stay up to date with what's happening at the clinic. The following content is the opinion of Jackie and Tad Tewes and is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical conditions. Be sure to speak to your healthcare provider for your unique health needs. Welcome back, everyone, to the Flourishing Life podcast. Tad and Jackie here from Flourish Medical and Wellness, where our priority is listening to you, our patients, and practicing a team approach to foundational wellness for long-term healing. So we are back. It's a new year, maybe a little bit different look to the podcast this year. We're excited for the upcoming season that we have planned for all of you. And we are starting it off with a very common topic.
Hot topic. GLP-1s.
GLP-1s. And so we are going to talk about all things, not getting in too much to the nitty gritty of like the pathophysiology, because we don't want to bore you all, but just some really great key takeaways that we hear a lot of in clinic.
Yeah. And this is the season for talking about GLP-1s too. So many people coming into the clinic in January saying, okay, how do I get started off on the right foot? I've struggled with weight or I've struggled with body composition in the past. What are the tools at my disposal?
Yeah. This just popped in my head and we have to remember to talk about it at the end. I've heard this so many times in this last week I feel like it's cheating.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we circle back to that.
For sure.
When we talk through things.
Yeah. And that's, education and some of the mental games or misconceptions out there. It's important to talk through that.
For sure. And we hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, we're just going to high level view. What are GLPs? Glucagon-like peptides. So it's a peptide. Peptides are made naturally by our body. I think we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of peptides in our body.
Yep.
And peptides are essentially smaller proteins. So peptides are made up of 100 or fewer amino acids, whereas proteins are made up of 100 or more amino acids. And so that's really the difference. They are signals. They're cell signals. So they signal the cell to do something else for another cell. And they communicate between a lot of our organs, our pancreas, our stomach, our heart, our blood vessels, our brain. So these are naturally made in the L cells of our gut. So this is not some foreign substance that our body doesn't have or isn't used to seeing and not knowing what to do with.
Exactly. Yeah. And the interesting part, peptides are such a hot issue right now, especially with all the application, not just in modifying appetite, not just in weight loss and body composition, but also anti-inflammatory function, their effects on growth hormone, all those different things.
Yeah. So big takeaway from what are they is they are a natural substance, all peptides, but specifically GLPs, a natural substance that our body makes and we are created with. It's not something that we're putting in that is foreign to the body.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about how do they actually work?
Yes. So how they work, again, glucagon-like peptide, a natural peptide or sequence of amino acids in the body. And how GLP-1s work is they delay gastric emptying, which means that they slow down digestion, and they also affect appetite. So when we look at the effects of GLP-1 in the body, there's multiple different mechanisms that are used not only to control blood sugars, but also to control appetite and cravings too. And that's why we tend to see improvement in things like cravings for sugar, carbohydrates, alcohol, and those areas that people oftentimes struggle with, especially in adulthood. So because these medications were originally designed for people with diabetes or insulin resistance, semaglutide and tirzepatide studies, what they found was, yes, they'll help with blood sugar control. They'll improve things like a hemoglobin A1C, which is that average blood sugar over 90 days. But because they're slowing down that gastric emptying or digestion, and they're also positively affecting appetite and the reward centers in the brain, all these people are losing weight too. So that's when, hey, there's another application for this, maybe beyond just people who are diagnosed type 2 diabetics.
So really what we see for these patients that find benefit from them, a few things. Yes, it's helping heal them metabolically, but it's also helping reduce cravings and feeling fuller sooner and longer between meals. And then it's also acting, like you said, on that reward center of the brain, which is controlling that food noise. That's something that we hear so often. Like so many people are consumed with thoughts about food all day, every day. What should I eat? What shouldn't I eat? And so this tool I have found to be incredible when it comes to just dialing that food noise down because of that reward center in the brain. And then people are able to make a better choice.
100%. And how it presents many times to us is I'm addicted to chocolate. I have to have my glass of red wine in the evening. I love Sour Patch Kids and stuff like that. But what are some other applications for GLP-1s that you use?
Yeah, so there are a lot, actually. I have found it personally to be successful in patients with things like PCOS because of that insulin resistance. I've also very, very commonly seen it reduce thyroid antibodies, so Hashimoto's, and other autoimmune conditions, just help bring down inflammation, help kind of regulate that immune system overall. It has been studied in things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, addiction, like alcohol addiction, has been a really big help for some people also. I don't know that we have a lot of studies on this yet, but from the patients that I talk to, mental health.
Absolutely.
People I often hear, I just feel better. I just feel better when I'm on it. And that's mentally and emotionally. And so I think that's really cool. I think we'll continue to learn more about that. But then of course, that metabolic function, lowering liver enzymes, dropping cholesterol, improving insulin resistance, reducing blood sugar. Inflammation is huge. I don't know if you see that a lot, but people come in and they're just like, you can even just see it in their face, like how much that inflammation has gone down. It's not even just losing weight. It's just the inflammation is gone. So that's super cool.
Well, and to piggyback on that, you talked about decreased inflammation and also things like mood. So when we think about insulin resistance, you don't have to be a diabetic to have insulin resistance.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, insulin resistance is diagnosed so late in the vast majority of people where the body is trying to keep up with insulin and it's holding those blood sugars with more and more insulin until finally the dam starts to break.
Yeah.
And then that A1C starts to rise up until there's a diagnosis of prediabetes and then diabetes. The problem is inflammation, including neuroinflammation in the central nervous system, that happens long before a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Yeah. And so some of the mood and some of the brain fog, loss of access to short-term memory, all that is happening before that diagnosis.
It's the classic case of the traditional medical world where we wait to diagnose something until it's like really bad versus, hey, this is happening. Like, let's stop it. Like, let's not let it get to diabetes. Let's get ahead of the game here.
Plug the hole in the boat instead of taking it out of the bottom of the lake.
Yeah. The other thing I found when I was doing some research and digging into this for this podcast was that they have actually found that Wegovy and Ozempic have been tied to dramatically lower cancer deaths. So in November of 2025, the University of California looked at about 6,800 patients with colon cancer specifically, and the patients who were using GLPs were less than half as likely to die within 5 years compared to those not on GLPs. So those on GLPs had a 15.5% chance of dying within 5 years, and those not on was a 37.1%.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Yeah. And when we think about all-cause mortality, so much of that stems off of inflammation. And if these tools are used the right way, and you know this, we're not people who are just schlepping GLP-1s out the door, because that's very, very poor practice and it's unethical. At the same time, when these are woven into a healthy lifestyle and a healthy program for that individual, they can be so powerful.
Absolutely. And it goes back to this whole idea that even like with hormones, right? Like we are very big advocates that our body was created on purpose, exactly as it should be. God made it that way to function well. And so just like hormones, when we're putting those back in, they're supposed to be there. These GLPs, glucagon-like peptide, is supposed to be there. And a lot of times what we see is we don't have enough of them because of chronic stress, because of our inflammatory foods, just our overall nutrition status, especially as Americans.
Yeah.
And so we, over time as a population, have become very deficient in the production of this glucagon-like peptide, which is why they're such a powerful tool when used appropriately.
Yeah.
But again, they can't be used appropriately. So there's a lot of critics out there who just dog on these things and they're really bad and all this stuff. They can be, okay? They can be when they're not used appropriately, but that is not the whole story. Like there's no way that we see these things of lowering cancer risk and lowering metabolic dysfunction and improving liver enzymes, and they're bad for the body. Like that doesn't go hand in hand.
And if we're using these at a low dose, which we should be able to in most individuals, what we're doing is we're giving that person a nice tailwind, pushing them forward metabolically toward health, as long as the lifestyle pieces of activity, sleep hygiene, an appropriate dietary regimen, which may or may not include things like fasting or carbohydrate restriction. It helps people get to a better metabolic health, which all-cause mortality stems directly off of that.
Absolutely.
You made one other really good point about most Americans don't have enough GLP-1 in adulthood. And that's where, because of the American diet, because of chronic stress, sedentary behavior, we see so many adults just lose that GLP-1 over time.
Okay, so let's shift a little bit. Let's talk about side effects.
Yeah.
Tell me about side effects.
Hop on Google. Google has all the answers.
Or Instagram.
Or Instagram.
Or TikTok, probably. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah. So here's what people need to know about side effects of GLP-1s. GLP-1 side effects are typically dose related, meaning that if the dose of that is too high for a person's body, absolutely, side effects can occur. And the common four that we see are going to be fatigue, nausea, headache, and constipation.
Or diarrhea.
Sometimes diarrhea. It's fair. But those are ones that are going to be the more common side effects, again, dose dependent in most individuals, meaning that if we start at a low dose, we slowly titrate to where the person's losing like 1 to 1.5 pounds per week. That individual should be able to dose this with a once a week injection or a microdose twice a week injection to be losing that weight, having that improvement on symptoms and appetite without even knowing they're taking the injection. It's this injection that might as well be a placebo as long as it's dosed appropriately. Now, there are also more rare side effects, things like pancreatitis or inflammation of the pancreas. Not common. It's something that we do see at higher dosages, especially when people get up to doses of 10, 12.5, 15 milligrams of tirzepatide, which is Mounjaro or Zepbound would be the trade names. That is where we start to see that more and more, as well as the higher doses of semaglutide.
I will say I have seen this, I think, a couple times. The first time was the patient did not understand how to read a syringe, and so was giving too much right away out of the gate. And then the other time was from a patient who unfortunately got these medications off of the internet and did not have clear direction and was just titrated up super high, super fast.
Yeah.
And they ended up in the hospital. So again, it happens, but when it's done correctly, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it one time in patients who have used it appropriately and who have been monitored and tracked appropriately.
Absolutely. And when there's the right education and counseling, which is a huge part of what we do here, the lifestyle changes should allow that person to utilize a lower dose and still see the desired results.
So going along with the delayed gastric emptying, yes, that's partly how it works. There are some, I think, rumors out there that it causes gastroparesis, where the stomach is just slowed down so much and it will never return to pre-medication levels. Again, I have not found that at all, not in any of the patients I've used it with. A very common thing that we do hear about and that we do see is hair loss, unfortunately. And so again, there's been no studies or links saying, hey, this medication actually causes hair loss. What we see is that hair loss can happen if we're not being nutrient balanced and getting appropriate nutrients. And so this is true with any weight loss, no matter how you lose weight, an injection or a GLP or not. You can see hair loss just simply from losing weight. And so again, very dose dependent. It 100% goes into what you're eating and are you giving the body enough nutrients to maintain that hair. So it's not something we're going to see every single time. The other one that goes along with that is muscle mass. And you hear this a lot. I think you get a lot of scare tactics out there about muscle mass loss. And yes, it is exceedingly important that you are tracking muscle mass, which is why we do body scans. But again, if you're being tracked, you're being monitored, you're having a specific plan, nutrition, exercise for you with what we're seeing, we don't see that. And you can absolutely build muscle even while you're on GLPs. So it all comes back to dosing, tracking, monitoring, and then nutrition and what you're putting in.
Yeah. And that's something that we've tracked. I mean, individuals who have lost 20, 30 pounds and gained muscle through that process. And that's where body composition just completely flips and is an amazing improvement, as well as typically insulin resistance too. But when we think about how to use these and maintain muscle, people have to prioritize protein. It's a non-negotiable of saying, okay, we are going to prioritize protein and whole foods, so vegetables and fruits with that, and have some carb intake. You know, it can't be completely carb free for most individuals, but protein is really going to be that building block, and then adding in resistance training regularly with that. The other big piece is these medications can decrease water intake and that thirst drive. So people need to be diligent and intentional about water intake through the day.
Okay, so a big one that I've heard about lately too is that GLPs cause blindness. They're going to make you go blind. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when they did these studies were done on people who have diabetes. And as we know, as diabetes progresses, it is going to have vascular changes or changes to the blood vessels, chronic changes that will be, that will increase over time. So you're looking at people who are already what are called vasculopaths or already have blood vessel disease, and extremely low rate in people who are diabetics to begin with. But it is a possibility in pre-existing vasculopaths. In people who are non-diabetics, exceedingly rare. I actually haven't ever heard of that in somebody who's not a diabetic.
Yeah, so my understanding is that all of the studies done on GLPs, and they weren't necessarily tirzepatide and semaglutide, but all of them that were done in diabetic patients who again already have that higher risk of something called retinopathy or damage of those small blood vessels that are feeding the eye. And so that's same thing as neuropathy in the feet. It's the same thing, but it's affecting the vision, the eyes. And so that's the studies where these people are kind of bringing this up and saying, oh, be careful, this will cause you to go blind. No, it has only been shown in patients and humans that have a pre-existing diabetes diagnosis. And again, it's still very, very rare.
Yeah. And as you know, the condition diabetic retinopathy, or changes to the back of the eye, that retina, that does occur in a lot of people with advanced diabetes.
Yeah. So there have been no studies that have shown blindness in anyone using a GLP that did not already have a previous history of eye disease.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another big one. Thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
Tell me about thyroid cancer and GLPs.
Okay, so this is going to get into the weeds a little bit, but typically this comes from rodent studies, and they're talking about medullary thyroid cancer, a specific type of thyroid cancer that is very rare in humans. But in rat studies, rats developed what's called C-cell hyperplasia, or increased growth of that specific type of cell within the thyroid. And one thing that's different about rodents compared with humans is the C cells express a lot more GLP-1 receptors on those cells, meaning that just their reaction to GLP-1 will be different than a human thyroid C cell. So that's something where there are some differences there. There's no consistent findings for increased thyroid cancer risk in humans. Again, this is coming from rodent or rat studies. And medullary thyroid cancer is exceedingly rare, 1 to 2 cases per 1 million people per year in human beings.
Okay, so takeaways. The The incidence of this type of cancer is only 1 to 2 per 1 million people per year.
Correct.
And all of this data or literature comes from rodent studies only. There have been no findings of thyroid cancer associated with GLPs in humans.
None that I know of. The other thing that we should mention, so there is another contraindication, meaning that if a person has a family history of a condition called multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2 or MEN type 2, they should not use these medications.
We get these questions or these hesitations about GLPs, and we never force them on anyone. Like, it's totally up to them. It's their choice. It can be a very helpful tool, and we'll kind of talk about some things that we've seen in cases with our patients. My personal thought and opinion on this is, even with all the noise, okay, we talk about these super rare things, the blindness, the thyroid cancer, the pancreatitis, the gastroparesis. They're exceedingly rare, if like maybe not ever even happening in humans. Yet metabolic dysfunction,
Everywhere.
high cholesterol, high liver enzymes, high blood sugar, insulin resistance, that is very prominent, and that will kill you.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
instead of us talking about, hey, wait, these are actually really, really beneficial, because if I'm obese or overweight and I have all these things happening, I am at a significantly higher risk of death than medullary thyroid cancer.
And I think some of that comes from the way the pharmaceutical products are dosed, in terms of big gaps in between dosing and the lack of provider education and counseling through the process. It has to be there for optimal results.
Well, and social media, I think there, it's so easy to like see these things, and these things get put out and this fear develops. But again, I think if you take a step back and you just think logically about this, these chances of these kind of super rare things happening are so small, and almost never, and some never. But yet the reason you'd want to be on it for your metabolic dysfunction, that presents you a real risk for your health and your longevity. So in my opinion, like, it's a no-brainer. If you're struggling with metabolic dysfunction and you've tried all the things and you can't get past that, you can't get things to go reverse and go the other way, you're at much higher risk of not using the GLP-1 than you are of using it. Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit and just talk about our personal experience with our patients, our practice, and kind of what we've seen. So first, I think let's clarify all the different names.
Oh boy.
Tirzepatide, semaglutide, Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, and Mounjaro. Do you want to take that?
Sure. So semaglutide, more of a first generation GLP-1. It has one mechanism of action, which is that GLP-1. And common trade names that people will see if they get it at a pharmacy like Walgreens or CVS is going to be Wegovy or Ozempic. And then tirzepatide has that same GLP-1 action, also action on what's called GIP. So it's a dual mechanism medication. Mounjaro and Zepbound will be the two trade names for that.
Yeah. And typically what we see is Mounjaro. So the tirzepatide version is Mounjaro, and that's typically for diabetics. And then with semaglutide, we're going to see the Wegovy is typically for diabetics, and Ozempic is approved for weight loss. And then Zepbound is the tirzepatide approved for weight loss.
Yeah.
So they're really all the same thing.
Yeah.
They just have different names, and it can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit of a game with insurance coverage.
Yeah. So tirzepatide, Zepbound, Mounjaro, all the same. Semaglutide, Wegovy, Ozempic, all the same. Okay, let's talk about what do you see the differences like in your clinical practice? Do you see a difference between tirzepatide, semaglutide? We can kind of talk about what the literature shows in head-to-head studies, but what do you see?
Yeah, I think both can be very effective. If I was, required to choose one or the other, I would choose tirzepatide over semaglutide because of that dual action instead of just the singular GLP-1 action. That said, lifestyle, appropriate dosing, those are going to play a huge role in this as well. So both can be very effective, but I would give the nod to tirzepatide if I needed to choose.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I prefer that because I do tend to see fewer side effects with tirzepatide. I find it to be more tolerated, well tolerated as far as GI side effects like the nausea and things like that. And then I do find it to be more effective. And I think that's what head-to-head studies show as well.
Yeah.
Those on tirzepatide did have a higher amount of weight loss than semaglutide. Every once in a while, I'll get a patient who does better with semaglutide, but for the most part, my experience has been that tirzepatide has fewer side effects, a higher weight loss profile as far as percentage of weight loss. And then also I see it to be a little bit better even on cholesterol and liver function and all of that, just a little more significant improvement in those other markers.
Yeah. And one interesting thing, some of those studies are looking at high doses of these medications. Our goal is to have patients never have to use high doses of these medications, a low to mid-level dose of these to get the desired results. One thing that I forgot to touch on earlier when you were talking about muscle loss is the rate of weight loss does matter. Losing weight too fast, it is almost impossible not to lose muscle through that process. So losing about a pound, maybe 1.5 pounds per week, that's about max for trying to maintain muscle.
Yeah, we kind of say 1 or 2 pounds per week. Little to no side effects is what we want. And that's the sweet spot. And a lot of people can get there at very, very low doses. There's kind of this idea of, well, can they maintain that once they hit their goal? And what I've found is that the body really does reset to this kind of new normal. It takes about a year. Like we have to maintain that weight loss for about a year for that body to kind of really reset and rebalance at that new set point.
Yeah. And that's, for everybody out there listening, that's what we shoot for, is getting a person to a very healthy body weight and body composition, not just a body weight. And then ideally being able to taper off these medications, rely on the lifestyle pieces that got them there, and have that carry them into the future as a long-term plan.
Yeah. What have you seen gone wrong? Any like horror stories?
No horror stories. I mean, I have had people where they're 3-4 weeks into tirzepatide injections, they're making good progress, and then it's a New Year's party and they, drink a fair amount of alcohol or do that and, wash down the cheesecake with alcohol and just feel awful. I mean, which can happen on these medications, but nothing crazy. Yeah.
And that's a good point too. If we do see increased GI side effects, it's usually directly related to what they're choosing to eat. Fried foods, just not good, healthy food. And we see that much less with whole foods. I think the biggest things I've seen are actually usually when patients come to me already on GLPs from like an online order or something else, and they're not being monitored. They have no plan. They have no nutrition guidelines. They have no, exercise recommendations. They're not being monitored. Their muscle mass is exceedingly low, and they're basically that skinny fat. Like,
for sure.
It is really, really, really hard to build that back up. And I think that's the worst thing that I've seen, is that, man, you got to have a plan going into it, and you have to be monitored. Yeah.
And I think I can speak for you in this. That's probably our biggest angst with these big online, medical setups that are sending people GLP-1s. And maybe that person is taking a weight at home, but like you said, the program isn't there for lifestyle. And then the body composition monitoring is not there, because when people lose weight and get skinny fat and they've lost, let's say they've lost 40 pounds and 25 of that was muscle. If they try and go away from that GLP-1, their metabolic rate is so low because of all the muscle that they've lost, and they're stuck. They're in a bad spot, and digging out of that hole, like you said, it's very hard.
Yeah. I have found GLPs to be such a wonderful tool in our perimenopause and menopausal women.
Yeah.
It's just, we can do all the right things, and that's such a difficult phase of life where I have women who literally do all the right things: sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress management, and they still they can't get over it. They can't lose the 10 pounds that they put on. And it is such an incredible tool. And I love using it in those patients because it is so empowering for them.
Yeah.
They feel, those are the patients that, like, again, mental health are just like, I feel so much better. I feel like myself again. I'm more confident again. I'm happier in my relationship again. I want to be intimate with my husband again because they feel better in their skin. And so I have found it to be an incredible tool in perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah. Kind of an offshoot to this, there is a newer supplement out on the market called CaloCurb, designed for appetite. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a pretty cool supplement. So CaloCurb is a plant-derived supplement, and specifically a bitter hops plant. And what we know is that bitters in general, we use that for a lot of GI things when it comes to gut health. But when it was released, they did studies on this, and when it was released at a specific point in the gut specifically, it actually increased natural GLP production. I think it was like 600% or something.
Yeah.
So like significant. And then it also activated some of our other kind of satiety and hunger hormones as well. And so they found it to really reduce cravings and that feeling of fullness. And I think it lasted about 5 hours after. And they saw great weight loss results with this as well. So this is a really good supplement for those people who are very against the injection or a prescription of a GLP. It's going to mimic it. It will not be as good. So you're still going to get benefits, but head to head, it's not going to be as good. And so it's an option. And I think it's very appropriate in some cases. Like maybe we don't have a lot of weight to lose. Maybe we have a needle phobia. I like to use it, when we're coming off of GLPs, is a very great way to kind of taper off. And so a super cool tool that we have, and it's out there and it's good. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate you highlighting too, it's a natural appetite suppressant, but it does not have some of the effects on insulin or inflammation that GLP-1s will.
Yeah, and because of how it works, you do have to take it before meals. So if you want it to work, you have to take it before the meal. All right. Let's end this baby with some real life patient stories, what we've seen here in clinic with some of our patients. You want to start?
I would love to start. This is my favorite part. This is the cool stuff, because this is where everybody that we tell you about is somebody that we have worked with who came to us frustrated saying, I've been trying to lose weight. I've been trying to improve this area. How do we get there? And just following that person, counseling that person through months or even years in some cases has been super, super gratifying. So first guy, a 52-year-old male, in about 6.5 months, he lost 45 pounds. He maintained all of his muscle mass. So we checked that on an in-body scan. We use in-body scanners, and he had lost a ton of fat, maintained that lean body mass in pounds. We did this with weekly tirzepatide injections and monitoring his dosing, intermittent fasting with a focus on whole foods, getting enough protein, getting good hydration throughout the day, and also really cutting down on alcohol. Alcohol was a big barrier for him. He was drinking 20 to 30 drinks a week. We cut that down to 5 or less drinks a week, and that was an absolute game changer. As soon as he did that, the weight started falling off, and the tirzepatide really helped with the alcohol cravings, especially as he was coming down.
Yeah, that one's huge. I hear that all the time. And so many people are stuck in the weight because of the alcohol, and alcohol is such an accepted thing, but you have to get rid of that. And it's so cool how it works in both ways, because it's like, I don't really want the alcohol. And so they just stop it, and then that helps them lose even more, which is great.
Well, and the timing of when people drink too. I mean, they're having it post dinner, before bed. I mean, it's this alcoholic sugar bomb is how the body looks at it. Next one was a 48-year-old female. She lost 25 pounds over 5 months. So right at about that 5 pounds per month. So 23 pounds was fat loss, 2 pounds of muscle. She did a really nice job with resistance training. And as a leaner female, now a leaner female, I should say, she did a really nice job with following the regimen. She also was weekly tirzepatide injections, prioritizing protein and whole foods. There was no intermittent fasting involved for her. Really focused also on 10,000 plus steps per day, strength training 4 days per week as well. 47-year-old male. He lost 48 pounds by adjusting his eating. We did kind of a customized fasting schedule for him where it wasn't an all or none thing. He was doing a certain fasting schedule 4 days a week. He had to modify that a little bit, 2 days a week, and then he had 1 day a week of just regular eating pattern. That 48 pounds he lost over 11 months. And then finally, 51-year-old female. She went from 228 pounds to 179 pounds over 2 years. So this was a much slower, low dose way of approaching this. She used Mounjaro. So at the lowest dose, though, she stayed at a 2.5 milligram dose weekly and was able to maintain all of her muscle mass. We did some rotating intermittent fasting, focused on protein, whole foods, regular resistance training as well for her 4 to 5 days a week.
That is a really good point, and we should have mentioned this earlier, but a lot of times too with those online orders, what we see, what I've seen at least, is that they just auto say, hey, after a month, go up to this dose. After a month, go up to this dose. After a month, go up to this dose. And that's where we get into trouble. That's where we see significant issues. And so, yeah, people can be on a super low dose and continue to lose weight. They don't have to go up.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a guy. I just this last week saw him back, and he's making incredible progress. He's on 15 units of tirzepatide from our compounding pharmacy, which is awesome because we're able to make minuscule little changes to his dosing there. But he is below even the starting dose for Mounjaro, and he'll probably never even get to the starting dose of Mounjaro.
Yeah. Super cool.
But yeah, tell us about some of your people.
All right. I have a few here, many more, but these are the ones that kind of stuck out right away when I was thinking about them. So 44-year-old female, she lost 40 pounds. Her visceral fat went from 17 to 11. So again, visceral fat, the dangerous fat around the organs. Our goal for patients is around 7 or less. So 17 to 11 is a huge change. Her muscle mass, when we did her last scan, was still at 135% for her height. So that muscle mass is great. No issues there. Her HDL went up by 12 points.
Nice.
Her triglycerides went down by 741 points. 741.
That's insane.
It was so high that the LDL wouldn't even calculate. So amazing. And then her liver enzymes dropped 39 points. That is a life-changing benefit. That's what I was talking about earlier, where even with all these kind of scary, gastroparesis and pancreatitis, all these things, this metabolically is such a huge risk if you don't fix it. That's a big deal. So super cool. 56-year-old female, down 22 pounds. Her visceral fat went from 12 to 7. Her body fat percentage was down 10%. And her muscle mass was still at 110% for her height. Super cool one about this is that her Crohn's has never been in better control.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big reasons that we started it. Her LDL was down 30 points. 42-year-old female, she is down 30 pounds, visceral fat at 6. And the cool thing I like about this one is that she is I eat more than I ever have. Okay. And it's because she's eating the right things. She's moving her body. So it's not about restriction. Caloric restriction and weight loss is not a plan for success. You cannot keep that up. It's about eating the right things and fueling the body the right way. So that one's super cool. And then my last one is a 39-year-old female, microdosing only 1 or 2 times a month, actually. And the big reason for her that we've been doing this is for her Hashimoto's. And her antibodies, her thyroglobulin antibodies, were down from 37 to 2.9. And she had lost some weight and some visceral fat as well. So again, those are just some examples of how it's so much more than just weight loss. It's metabolic health, it's autoimmunity, so many cool things.
Absolutely. So what are 2 or 3 just takeaways for everybody listening, simple pieces of advice from you that they can take with them?
We talked about this earlier and we never circled back. And so I want to do that. The cheat thing, right? I feel like this is cheating. And I've heard it more recently. And here's the thing. I think old school provider-patient relationship just used to tell people it's willpower. Like, you just need to eat less and move your body more. That's why you're overweight. Like, you're lazy, you're not moving, and you're eating the wrong things. That's why you're overweight. And so that's really how we would approach it. What we've learned is that there can be changes in our hormones, our satiety hormones, our peptides in our gut, our hunger hormones, and that can be actually more of a disease. And so these people have a hard time just eating less, right? Because there's actually pathophysiology and things going on that's keeping them from doing it. And so we've kind of moved over to this camp of, well, obesity and overweight is just a disease, and it's just the disease process. And I don't know that I fit in that camp either, because I do think there does need to be some willpower, right? Some I need to watch what I eat and I need to move my body. It's not the whole story, but it's part of it. So I'm not like, hey, it's just what you eat and how you move, or it's just this disease process that you can't control. I think it's in the middle. I think we have to look at both. And so when people say, oh, I feel like it's a cheat code. Yeah, it's a cheat code if you're not doing the work. That's what I think. If you are simply relying on this injection, you're not eating, you're not working out, you are that skinny fat, absolutely, it is a cheat code. But if you are that patient where you've done all the things and you can't lose the weight, there can absolutely be some physiologic changes that prevent you from being able to lose the weight. And it's not a cheat code, right? If you're doing the right things, you're putting in the work, and it's helping your body become more metabolically flexible and sensitive, that's not cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. And these medications, for all the information and opinions that are floating around out there, when a GLP-1 is dosed appropriately and combined with the education and the counseling and the ongoing care, these are going to be the most transformative medications that I believe I'll see in my lifetime in America. Like, because we look at the United States of diabetes, which is basically what we've become. These medications are tailored for metabolic health when they're done right on mass scale. And the other piece behind that is I love using these from a compounding pharmacy, a high-level vetted compounding pharmacy. We can make micro adjustments to the dosing that we can't make with Mounjaro or Zepbound or Wegovy.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything you have? Any last words?
For people who are interested in GLP-1s, do your research. Do your research, and then also find a provider or a clinic with a great track record that is education-based, like ours is, where it is a clinic that is going to take time with that individual, walk beside them through the whole process to ensure that they get results. That's the key here. It can't just be the medication. It's got to be those two things paired together.
Yeah, love it. All right, I think that is a wrap for today. This upcoming podcast season for you guys, we're really going to be diving in and giving you an inside look to what we see every day in clinic. So real patient case studies, just really bringing you along with us. And hopefully it's a little more entertaining than us just giving all this medical scientific stuff. So we would love for you to continue to join us in this year.
Yeah, we'll try not to make this a seminar. And one other thing, like Jackie had said, we'll try and bring you what we're seeing on a regular basis in clinic, because what's common is common. But thank you for taking the time to listen to us, and God bless everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Flourishing Life podcast. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on our YouTube channel. If you liked this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And we would love it if you would share this episode with a friend and follow us on socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, or on our website at flourishmedicalwellness.com. Chat soon, everyone. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace medical advice or to be a substitute for professional medical diagnosis or treatment.